The rain hammered against the glass windows of the upscale Manhattan restaurant as Sarah Mitchell adjusted her simple black dress and checked her watch. She had arrived 20 minutes early for her dinner meeting with the Pentagon officials, a habit that had served her well during her 15 years in covert operations. Most people saw a petite woman in her late 30s with shoulder-length brown hair and kind eyes. They had no idea she commanded one of the most elite SEAL task forces in the country. The maitre d' approached with a polite smile. "Ms. Mitchell, your table is ready." Sarah followed him through the dimly lit restaurant, past tables filled with politicians, business executives, and wealthy socialites. The establishment was known for its discretion, which made it perfect for sensitive meetings. As they walked, she noticed a commotion near the bar area but paid it little attention. "Here we are," the maitre d' said, gesturing to a corner table with a clear view of both entrances. "Your guests should arrive shortly." Sarah thanked him and settled into her seat, mentally reviewing the classified briefing she would be discussing. The mission parameters were complex, requiring precision and absolute secrecy. Her task force had been handpicked for operations that didn't officially exist, and tonight's meeting would determine their next deployment. The restaurant buzzed with conversation and the gentle clinking of expensive glassware. Sarah observed the other patrons with the trained eye of someone who had spent years reading people and situations. In her world, a moment's inattention could mean the difference between life and death. At a nearby table, a man in an expensive suit was speaking loudly into his phone. His voice carried across the restaurant as he berated someone on the other end about a failed business deal. Richard Blackstone was a real estate mogul known for his aggressive tactics and explosive temper. He owned half the commercial buildings in the city and wasn't shy about reminding people of his influence. "I don't care what the zoning committee says," Blackstone barked into his phone. "I own this city, and they'll do what I tell them to do." Sarah glanced at him briefly before returning her attention to the entrance. Her contacts were running late, which was unusual for military personnel. She checked her encrypted phone for messages, but found none. Blackstone ended his call with a slam of his phone against the table, drawing annoyed looks from nearby diners. He drained his whiskey glass in one gulp and signaled aggressively for another. The waiter approached cautiously, having already endured several of the man's outbursts. "Where's my drink?" Blackstone demanded. "Do you know how much money I spend in this place?" The young waiter apologized profusely and hurried away to fulfill the order. Sarah watched the interaction with mild interest, filing away details about the man's behavior patterns. In her line of work, understanding human psychology was crucial. 20 minutes passed, and Sarah's phone finally buzzed with an encrypted message. The meeting had been moved to a secure location due to a potential security breach. She would need to leave immediately and meet her contacts at a safe house across town. Sarah quietly paid for her untouched water and began making her way toward the exit. The restaurant was busier now, with servers weaving between tables and a small crowd gathered near the coat check. She moved with practiced ease, avoiding bumping into anyone while maintaining her situational awareness. As she approached the entrance, she noticed Blackstone stumbling slightly as he rose from his table. He had clearly had several drinks, and his movements were unsteady. His business associates looked embarrassed as he loudly demanded his coat from the attendant. Sarah reached the coat check area just as Blackstone was berating the young woman behind the counter about the speed of service. The attendant was doing her best to remain professional while handling the increasingly aggressive customer. "This is ridiculous," Blackstone slurred. "I shouldn't have to wait for anything in this place. Do you have any idea who I am?" The coat check attendant apologized and continued searching for his coat among the dozens hanging behind her. Sarah stepped up beside him to retrieve her own jacket, maintaining a polite distance. That's when everything went wrong. Blackstone, in his drunken state, mistook Sarah's movement as an attempt to cut in line. Without warning, he spun around and shoved her hard with both hands, sending her stumbling backward into a nearby pillar. "Hey!" he roared, his face red with alcohol and anger. "Wait your turn, lady!" Sarah steadied herself against the pillar, her training immediately kicking in. She could have easily disabled the man in several different ways, but she remained calm and composed. Drawing attention was the last thing she needed, especially with a classified mission briefing waiting. "I apologize," she said quietly, straightening her jacket. "I didn't mean to—" "Don't give me excuses," Blackstone interrupted, stepping closer with an aggressive posture. His voice carried across the restaurant, causing other patrons to turn and stare. "Do you know who I am? I could buy and sell everyone in this place." The restaurant manager appeared, wringing his hands nervously as he approached the scene. He recognized Blackstone as one of their most influential customers, someone who could make or break the establishment with a single bad review. "Mr. Blackstone, please," the manager said diplomatically. "I'm sure this was just a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Blackstone laughed harshly. "This woman tried to push ahead of me like I'm nobody." He pointed an accusing finger at Sarah, who remained perfectly still. "She needs to learn some respect." Sarah met his gaze steadily, her expression neutral. She had faced down terrorist leaders and hostile government officials in situations far more dangerous than this. A drunk businessman posed no real threat, but his behavior was creating exactly the kind of scene she needed to avoid. "I'll wait," she said simply, stepping back to give him more space. But Blackstone wasn't satisfied with her compliance. The alcohol had amplified his natural arrogance, and he sensed what he perceived as weakness. In his world, backing down was an invitation for others to take advantage. "That's right. You'll wait," he sneered. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before disrespecting someone important." The coat check attendant finally located Blackstone's expensive overcoat and handed it to him with trembling fingers. The poor girl looked terrified, clearly unused to dealing with such aggressive behavior. As Blackstone snatched the coat, he turned back to Sarah one more time. "Let this be a lesson to you," he said loudly enough for the entire entrance area to hear. "This is what happens when nobodies try to mess with somebody who actually matters in this city." Several other patrons had stopped to watch the confrontation, some pulling out their phones to record what appeared to be a wealthy man bullying an innocent woman. The manager looked mortified, knowing that any negative publicity could damage the restaurant's reputation. Sarah simply nodded politely and waited for him to leave. She had learned long ago that sometimes the most powerful response was no response at all. In her world, true strength was often invisible, hidden beneath layers of careful training and disciplined restraint. Blackstone struggled into his coat, still muttering about respect and knowing one's place. His business associates gathered around him, clearly eager to leave before he caused any more embarrassment. They had deals to close and reputations to maintain. "Come on, Richard," one of them said quietly. "The car is waiting." As the group finally began moving toward the exit, Blackstone couldn't resist one final parting shot. He turned back to Sarah with a cruel smile. "Next time, remember your place," he said with obvious satisfaction. "Not everyone gets to rub shoulders with people like me." With that, he and his entourage swept out of the restaurant, leaving behind a wake of uncomfortable silence. The other patrons gradually returned to their conversations, though many continued to glance in Sarah's direction with sympathy or curiosity. The coat check attendant approached Sarah with obvious concern. "I'm so sorry about that," she whispered. "Are you okay? Do you need me to call security?" "I'm fine," Sarah assured her with a gentle smile. "Just a misunderstanding." But as Sarah finally retrieved her jacket and prepared to leave for her rescheduled meeting, she had no way of knowing that Richard Blackstone had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The woman he had publicly humiliated wasn't just anybody. She was Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, and she led Task Force Neptune, one of the most classified and lethal special operations units in the United States military. 3 days after the restaurant incident, Sarah Mitchell sat in a secure briefing room deep within the Pentagon. The walls were lined with soundproofing material, and electronic scramblers ensured that no conversation could be intercepted. Around the polished table sat her team of elite operatives, each one carefully selected for their unique skills and unwavering loyalty. "The target is a high-value arms dealer operating out of Eastern Europe," Admiral Peterson explained, clicking through classified satellite images on the main screen. "Viktor Kozlov has been supplying weapons to terrorist organizations for over a decade. Multiple attempts to capture him through conventional channels have failed." Sarah studied the intelligence report spread before her. Kozlov was smart, well-connected, and paranoid. He surrounded himself with layers of security and rarely stayed in one location for more than a few hours. Taking him down would require surgical precision. "What's our entry point?" asked Marcus Chen, her second-in-command. The former Army Ranger had worked with Sarah for 6 years, and his tactical expertise was unmatched. "Intelligence suggests he'll be attending a private auction in Monaco next week," Admiral Peterson continued. "High-end art and antiquities, very exclusive clientele. It's the only time he ventures into relatively open territory." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "Security will be heavy, but it's better than trying to breach his compound in Montenegro." "There's one more thing," the Admiral said, his expression growing serious. "We have reason to believe Kozlov is planning something big. Recent chatter suggests he's acquired military-grade explosives and is looking for buyers among known terrorist cells." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just about stopping an arms dealer, it was about preventing a potential catastrophe that could claim thousands of innocent lives. "Timeline?" Sarah asked. "We have a narrow window. The auction is in 5 days. If we miss this opportunity, Kozlov will disappear for months, possibly years." Sarah looked around the table at her team. Each face reflected the same determination she felt. These men and women had volunteered for missions that officially didn't exist, operations that required them to sacrifice normal lives for the greater good. "We'll need cover identities," she said. "Wealthy collectors with legitimate reasons to attend the auction." "Already in progress," Admiral Peterson replied. "The CIA has prepared backgrounds for all of you. You'll be representing various private collectors and museums." As the briefing continued, Sarah's phone vibrated with an encrypted message from her intelligence contact in New York. She glanced at it discreetly, expecting routine surveillance updates. Instead, she found something completely unexpected. The message contained a link to a social media video from the restaurant incident 3 nights ago. Someone had filmed Blackstone's aggressive behavior and posted it online with the caption, "Rich bully attacks innocent woman at upscale restaurant." Sarah watched the video with professional detachment, observing the incident from an outside perspective. The footage clearly showed Blackstone's unprovoked aggression and her own measured response. What concerned her more was that her face was partially visible in the recording. She forwarded the link to her digital security specialist with instructions to monitor any attempts to identify her through facial recognition software. In her line of work, maintaining anonymity was crucial for both operational security and personal safety. The briefing concluded with final preparations for the Monaco mission. Sarah's team would spend the next 4 days training for every possible scenario, from peaceful extraction to full combat operations. There was no room for error when dealing with someone like Kozlov. Meanwhile, in his Manhattan office 50 floors above the city, Richard Blackstone was dealing with problems of his own. The video from the restaurant had gone viral, garnering over 2 million views in just 3 days. News outlets had picked up the story, and social media was buzzing with outrage over his behavior. "This is a disaster," his public relations manager explained, pacing nervously in front of Blackstone's massive mahogany desk. The video makes you look like a complete monster. We need damage control, and we need it now. Blackstone sat behind his desk, nursing a hangover and a bruised ego. He barely remembered the incident at the restaurant, but the video evidence was damning. His aggressive behavior was on full display for the world to see. "So, what if I had a few drinks?" he grumbled. "Some nobody got in my way, and I dealt with it. End of story." "Richard, please," his manager pleaded. "This isn't going away. Your board members are asking questions. Investors are concerned about your image. We have 3 major deals pending that could be jeopardized by this publicity." The phone on Blackstone's desk began ringing incessantly with calls from reporters, business partners, and concerned associates. His assistant had already fielded dozens of interview requests and damage control meetings. "What do you want me to do?" Blackstone asked irritably. "Apologize to some random woman I'll never see again?" "Actually, yes," the PR manager said. "If we can find her and arrange a public apology, it might help repair your image. People love redemption stories." Blackstone laughed harshly. "You want me to grovel to some nobody? Absolutely not." But as the day wore on, the situation continued to deteriorate. Major newspapers ran stories about his behavior, and business partners began expressing their concerns more forcefully. By evening, Blackstone realized he might not have a choice. He hired a private investigation firm to identify the woman from the video. If he was going to be forced into a public apology, he wanted to know exactly who he was dealing with. The firm assured him they could have answers within 48 hours. Back at the Pentagon, Sarah was reviewing Monaco surveillance footage when her security specialist appeared at her office door with a concerned expression. "Ma'am, we have a problem," he said, closing the door behind him. "That video from the restaurant is spreading faster than we anticipated, and someone is actively trying to identify you." Sarah looked up from her computer. "What kind of someone?" "Private investigation firm called Meridian Security. They were hired yesterday by Richard Blackstone, the man from the incident. They're using facial recognition software and cross-referencing with public databases." This was exactly what Sarah had feared. Any attempt to identify her could potentially compromise not just her current mission, but her entire career in covert operations. Her cover identities had been carefully constructed over years, and a single security breach could unravel everything. "How long before they find something?" she asked. "Hard to say. Your civilian identity is well protected. But if they dig deep enough or get lucky with a database we haven't secured..." Sarah made a quick decision. "Contact Agent Williams at the FBI. Tell him we need a priority security sweep on all my cover identities and see if we can trace back to whoever's funding this investigation." "Already on it, ma'am." As her specialist left, Sarah returned to studying the Monaco layouts, but her mind was divided. She had dealt with international terrorists, rogue governments, and criminal organizations. Now she found herself potentially exposed by a drunk businessman with too much money and too little sense. The irony wasn't lost on her. In 3 days, she would be infiltrating one of the most dangerous criminal networks in the world. But right now, her biggest security threat was a man who thought his wealth made him untouchable. Over the next 24 hours, the situation escalated on multiple fronts. The video continued spreading across social media platforms, garnering millions more views and generating thousands of outraged comments. News outlets began digging deeper into Blackstone's business practices, uncovering a pattern of aggressive behavior toward employees and competitors. At the same time, Meridian Security was making progress in their investigation. They had enhanced the video footage and were running the woman's image through increasingly sophisticated databases. Their client was paying premium rates for premium results, and they were determined to deliver. Sarah received hourly updates on the investigation's progress while simultaneously preparing for the Monaco mission. Her team was ready, their equipment secured, and their cover identities finalized. But the growing attention on her civilian persona created an additional layer of complexity. "We could arrange an accident for the investigation firm," Marcus suggested during a private meeting. "Make their computers crash, destroy their files." Sarah shook her head. "Too suspicious. If something happens to them right after they start looking for me, it might draw even more attention." "Then what's the play?" Sarah studied the latest intelligence reports from both the Kozlov investigation and the Blackstone situation. Two completely separate worlds were converging in ways she never could have anticipated. "We proceed with the mission as planned," she decided, "but we accelerate the timeline. I want to be in Monaco tomorrow night, ahead of schedule. The sooner we wrap up Kozlov, the sooner I can deal with this other situation." "And if they identify you before we get back?" Sarah's expression hardened with resolve. "Then Mr. Blackstone is going to learn exactly who he decided to mess with." Unknown to either Sarah or Blackstone, their paths were about to intersect again in ways neither could predict. The wealthy businessman's investigation would soon uncover more than just a name and address, and the elite operative he had so carelessly antagonized was about to become his biggest nightmare. The game was set in motion, and both players were moving their pieces across a board that would soon explode into a conflict neither had anticipated. The Monaco mission had been a complete success. Viktor Kozlov was now in federal custody, his arms-dealing network dismantled, and the military-grade explosives secured before they could reach terrorist buyers. Sarah's team had executed the operation with surgical precision, extracting the target from the heavily guarded auction without a single casualty. But as Sarah's military transport touched down at Andrews Air Force Base, her secure phone was buzzing with urgent messages. The Blackstone situation had exploded while she was overseas, and not in ways she had anticipated. "Ma'am, we have multiple developments," her intelligence specialist reported as she disembarked. "Meridian Security identified you 6 hours ago. They traced your civilian identity through a database leak at the DMV." Sarah's jaw tightened. This was exactly what she had feared. What did they find? "Your cover identity as Sarah Mitchell, freelance security consultant. Clean background, no obvious military connections, but they're digging deeper." "And Blackstone?" "That's where things get interesting. Apparently, his board of directors held an emergency meeting yesterday. The viral video has cost him 3 major contracts, and investors are threatening to pull funding from his latest development project. He's lost approximately $50 million in the past week." Sarah processed this information as they walked toward the debriefing facility. She had been focused on international arms dealers, while a drunk businessman had managed to nearly compromise her deepest cover identities through sheer stupidity and arrogance. "There's more," her specialist continued. "Blackstone is planning a press conference for tomorrow morning. His PR team convinced him that a public apology to you is his only chance to salvage his reputation. They want to turn it into a major media event." This was getting worse by the minute. The last thing Sarah needed was national media attention focused on her civilian identity. Even the most carefully constructed cover could crumble under sustained scrutiny from investigative journalists. "Where is he planning this press conference?" "The lobby of his headquarters building. They're expecting every major news outlet in the city." Sarah made a quick decision. "Set up a meeting, tonight. Private location. I'll handle this before it gets any more out of control." Her specialist looked surprised. "Ma'am, with respect, wouldn't it be easier to just let him apologize publicly and move on?" "Not when he's hired investigators to dig into my background," Sarah replied grimly. "If he's determined to find out who I am, I'd rather control how and when that happens." That evening, Richard Blackstone sat in his private study, reviewing the notes his PR team had prepared for the next day's press conference. The words felt foreign in his mouth, admitting fault and asking forgiveness. He had built his empire by never showing weakness, never backing down from a fight. His phone rang with a call from an unknown number. Normally, his assistant would filter such calls, but she had left hours ago. "Richard Blackstone," he answered curtly. "Mr. Blackstone, this is Sarah Mitchell." The voice was calm, professional, and completely unfamiliar. "I believe you've been looking for me." Blackstone nearly dropped the phone. After a week of investigation and preparation, the woman from the restaurant was calling him directly. "How did you get this number?" "We need to talk. Tonight. There are things about your investigation that you need to understand before your press conference tomorrow." "Look, lady, I don't know what game you're playing, but my lawyers—" "This isn't about lawyers or lawsuits," Sarah interrupted. "This is about the private investigators you hired and the information they've been gathering. Meet me at the Riverside Park boat basin in 1 hour. Come alone." The line went dead before Blackstone could respond. He stared at the phone, his mind racing. How had she gotten his private number? How did she know about the investigators? And why did her voice carry the kind of authority that made him want to follow her instructions, despite his natural inclination to refuse? Against his better judgment, Blackstone found himself driving through the city toward the meeting location. The park was nearly empty at this hour, with only a few late joggers and dog walkers moving through the shadows. He spotted a woman sitting alone on a bench overlooking the Hudson River. Even in the dim light, he recognized her as the woman from the restaurant. She looked smaller and more ordinary than he remembered, certainly not threatening enough to warrant his growing sense of unease. "Ms. Mitchell?" he called as he approached. Sarah turned to face him, and Blackstone was struck by the intensity in her eyes. There was something different about her demeanor. A controlled confidence that hadn't been apparent during their first encounter. "Thank you for coming," she said, gesturing to the bench beside her. "Please, sit down." Blackstone remained standing, using his height to maintain a psychological advantage. "I want you to know that I'm prepared to make a generous settlement offer. My behavior at the restaurant was inappropriate, and I'm willing to compensate you for any distress it may have caused." Sarah smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Mr. Blackstone, you hired Meridian Security to investigate my background. What exactly did they tell you?" "Just that you're some kind of security consultant," Blackstone replied, confused by the directional shift. "Look, I'm trying to make this right. My lawyers can have the paperwork ready by—" "Meridian Security found my cover identity," Sarah said quietly. "They told you I'm Sarah Mitchell, freelance security consultant with an address in Georgetown and a clean criminal record." Blackstone nodded, increasingly unsettled by her calm demeanor. "That's right. So what?" Sarah stood up slowly, and suddenly Blackstone became aware of how isolated they were. The nearest other person was at least 100 yards away, and the streetlights barely penetrated the shadows where they stood. "My real name is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell," she said in the same quiet tone. "I lead Task Force Neptune, a classified special operations unit within the United States Navy SEALs." Blackstone laughed nervously. "Right, and I'm the Pope. Lady, if you think you can con me with some military fantasy—" Sarah moved with lightning speed, grabbing Blackstone's wrist and applying just enough pressure to demonstrate her training without actually causing injury. He found himself immobilized by a grip that felt like steel cables. "3 days ago, while you were berating me at that restaurant, I was preparing for a classified mission to capture Viktor Kozlov, an international arms dealer wanted by 12 different countries," she continued in the same conversational tone. "My team successfully completed that mission yesterday in Monaco." Blackstone tried to pull away, but her grip was unbreakable. Panic began creeping into his voice. "You're insane. Let go of me." Sarah released him and stepped back, but her posture remained alert and dangerous. Your investigators triggered security protocols when they accessed certain databases. My superiors are now aware that a civilian has been actively trying to uncover the identity of a classified military operative. That's impossible, Blackstone stammered, rubbing his wrist. You're just some woman who happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. Sarah pulled out her phone and made a quick call. Within moments, a black SUV pulled up to the park entrance. Two men in dark suits emerged and began walking toward them with purposeful strides. Those are federal agents, Sarah explained calmly. They're here to discuss the national security implications of your investigation into my identity. Blackstone's face went pale as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Wait, you can't be serious. I just wanted to apologize. You hired private investigators to dig into the background of a classified military operative, Sarah replied. Whether you intended to or not, you've created a significant security breach. The federal agents approached, and one of them displayed his credentials. Mr. Blackstone, I'm Agent Rodriguez with the Department of Homeland Security. We need to have a conversation about your recent investigation activities. Blackstone looked frantically between Sarah and the agents. This is crazy. I just pushed someone at a restaurant. How was I supposed to know she was military? That's exactly the point, Sarah said. You weren't supposed to know. My cover identity exists to protect ongoing operations and the lives of military personnel. Your investigation has potentially compromised years of careful preparation. Agent Rodriguez stepped forward. Sir, we're going to need you to come with us for a debriefing. Any information your investigators gathered will need to be secured and classified. But my press conference tomorrow, Blackstone protested weakly, has been canceled, the agent replied firmly, and any public statements about this incident will now require federal approval. As the agents began escorting a stunned Blackstone toward their vehicle, Sarah walked alongside them. For what it's worth, Mr. Blackstone, your apology was probably sincere. But your decision to investigate me turned a simple misunderstanding into a matter of national security. Blackstone stopped walking and turned to face her, the full magnitude of his mistake finally becoming clear. Do you know who I am? He asked quietly, echoing his aggressive words from the restaurant. Sarah's expression softened slightly. You're a wealthy businessman who made a very expensive mistake. You're someone who thought his money and influence made him untouchable, and now you're someone who just learned that there are people in this world who are far more dangerous than you ever imagined. What happens now? Blackstone asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Now you get to experience what real power looks like, Sarah replied. Not the kind that comes from bank accounts or political connections, but the kind that comes from serving something greater than yourself. Agent Rodriguez opened the SUV door. Sir, we really need to go. As Blackstone climbed into the vehicle, he looked back at Sarah one more time. I'm sorry, he said, and for the first time it sounded genuine. Sarah nodded acknowledgement. I know you are, but sorry doesn't fix security breaches or undo investigations. From now on, you might want to think twice before asking someone if they know who you are, because the answer might surprise you. The SUV disappeared into the night, leaving Sarah alone in the park. She pulled out her phone and called her commanding officer. Mission accomplished, Admiral. The Kozlov situation is resolved, and the security breach has been contained. And Blackstone? Sarah smiled in the darkness. Let's just say he'll be much more careful about who he decides to push around in the future. Turns out money can't buy respect from people who've actually earned it. 2 weeks later, Richard Blackstone sat in his office, staring at a non-disclosure agreement that would govern the rest of his life. His investigation firm had been disbanded, their files confiscated and classified. His planned press conference had become a brief statement about taking time for personal reflection. The viral video had faded from social media, replaced by newer controversies and scandals. But Blackstone would never forget the lesson he learned that night in the park. In a city full of powerful people, he had accidentally antagonized someone whose power was real, earned through sacrifice and service rather than inherited wealth or business connections. He never saw Sarah Mitchell again, but sometimes, late at night, he wondered where in the world she might be, protecting people like him from threats they would never even know existed. And whenever he was tempted to use his wealth to bully someone weaker than himself, he remembered the woman who had taught him that true strength often came in packages he would never recognize. The question, "Do you know who I am?" had taken on an entirely new meaning. Because sometimes the answer could change everything.